Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today, we continue our study of the second book of Samuel, that's Shmuel Bet. We are about to begin chapter 19. At the end of chapter 18, we have just read of the victory of David's forces over Avshalom's forces, and thus restoring David to his throne and saving the united monarchy, at least for now. And we also learned of the death of Avshalom. At the end of the last verse of chapter 18, David was informed of the death of Avshalom, and despite David having commanded his troops, most specifically his leaders and Yoav, not to harm Avshalom, they obviously did not heed his instructions and killed him anyway. One would imagine that Yoav felt that his did it out of loyalty to David, because he felt that leaving Avshalom alive would simply allow for future rebellions and that he deserved to die, and he did it in order to safeguard David's kingdom. Nonetheless, he was clearly and blatantly disobeying his master. So when we begin with verse 1, Vayirgaz Hamelach, the king was angry. His initial reaction was that of anger, because obviously over the fact that his instructions weren't heeded. Vayal al aliyat hasha'ar, and he immediately went up to the upper chamber of the gate, around the gate of the city. So he went to the upper chamber there. Vayev, and he began to cry. He was angry, and then he began to cry. It is impossible to ignore and not feel the tremendous amount of guilt that David feels now. David has, after the guilt, most especially because of the sin that he did, that led to this destruction and death that has occurred over these last few chapters as a result of what he had done, and now it resulted in the loss of his son. The fact that his son went astray, the fact that his son killed his other son Amnon, the rape of Tamar, his daughter. It just goes on and on in the long list. And now this massive civil war, and now the death of Avshalom. He was hoping that maybe he can save Avshalom and somehow make some kind of reconciliation, but instead that's not what happened. Instead, it was his death. So Vayevki began to cry, V'ko Omar, and this is what he said, Bilechto, as he was you get the image of him pacing back and forth. B'ni Avshalom, my son Avshalom. B'ni Avshalom, my son Avshalom. Mi itein musi ani tachtecha, if only I would have died instead of you, Avshalom. B'ni, my son. So this is how David started to weep and cry. And this overwhelming sense of guilt that David feels for all that had happened, all the, and also looking back at his behavior, how he ignored Avshalom all these years, and how even the slight reconciliation that we thought we had was never truly heartfelt. It was never really real, and all of this led to this terrible disaster. Vayugadli Yoav, and it was told to Yoav, and people came around and said to Yoav, Hinei hamelech bochev vayisabel al Avshalom. The king is crying and he's mourning over Avshalom. So here, we just fought this tremendous war and battle. We literally put our lives on the line for the king. We won, and we come home, and instead of getting a hero's welcome, the king starts to cry and is mourning. Immediately, the victory that the people had over the enemy turned into just mourning for everyone. Because people heard everyone saying that day, the king, his reaction is, he's just sad about the loss of his son. And this verse paints this tragic image of how the people just kind of snuck into the city, returning from the battlefield. They snuck in in the same way that a defeated army would sneak into the city, not really wanting to see anyone or talk to anyone, because they had no victory to be proud of and celebrate. Instead, they had defeat. While Imagine this army that had just did everything they did and put their lives on the line for victory and were victorious, but they have to come back as if they were defeated. And the king covered his face by his and he cried out in a loud voice so that others around would hear, B'ni Avshalom, Avshalom, B'ni, B'ni. He just cried, my son Avshalom, Avshalom, my son, my son. So this situation, Yoav knew he needed to do something to change this situation. Yoav understood that at this point, this is not the time to confront the king and argue with him about why he had to kill Avshalom or why he did kill Avshalom. But rather, this is the time when the king needs to stand up and congratulate his soldiers and reunite the monarchy, and he can get back to mourning Avshalom later. There's a job to do now. So in verse 6, Vayavo Yoav el hamelech habayis, Yoav came to the king into the house where the king was staying, and he says to him as follows: Hovashta hayom et pnei chol avodecha. You have humiliated all of your servants, hamemaltim et nafshecha hayom, that has saved your life today. You are going to be killed by Avshalom and his forces. These people saved your lives, and now you're treating them this way. And they've saved not only your life, but the lives of your sons and your daughters, because you know what Avshalom would have done with the rest of the family. V'nefesh noshecha, and the lives of your wives, v'nefesh pilaksecha, and of your concubines. Li'ahava et sonecha, because what are you doing now? You're demonstrating love and concern over the people that hated you. V'lisno et ohavecha, and instead you are hating those that have loved you. Ki higadet hayom, because what is it that you have said? What message have you told us today? Ki ein lechasorim va'avodim, that that all of these servants and all of these officers that have loyally stood by your side mean nothing to you. Ki yadati hayom, because I know today, ki lo Avshalom chai, because it seems clear from what you it seems clear from your behavior today. Ki lu Avshalom chai, that if Avshalom was alive, v'chulonu hayom esim, and we had all died in battle, ki oz yashar beinecha, that would have been good for you. In other words, all you care about is Avshalom, but the fact that we won the battle, that we survived the battle, we who stood by your side loyally, that means nothing. But if Avshalom, had he lived, and he's your enemy, and we who stood by your side died, you wouldn't care. Now this is clearly not true. Avshalom, Yoav clearly knew this was not true. But he's saying this to shake David out of the funk that he was in, to get him to try to see what he needed to do as king at this moment. But it's still extremely brazen to imagine Yoav saying this to the king. It's a very very shocking statement here. But this is what he said. So verse 8, V'ata, now he tells the king what to do. In a way that's it's hard to imagine, but here we go. Kum say, get up and get out there, v'daber alev avadecha, and speak to the hearts of your servants. In other words, speak to them in a way that they see that you mean it. Ki ba'adonai nishbati, because I have sworn by God. Ki eincha yotzei, because that if you do not go out, im yalin ish itcha halayla, there won't be a single person staying here to support you. If you want to maintain your support in your monarchy, you better go out there and congratulate the people on their victory and show them how grateful you are for what they've done for you, and put together your kingdom again. And this will be worse than every other bad thing that has happened until now, in your entire life. So if you don't do this now, you will lose everything, because we're your supporters. We stood by your side. If you reject us now, if you reject the people now, you're completely lost. Vayakam HaMelech, the king, got the message, and he got up Vayeshev Bashar, and he sat in the gate. In other words, greeting the soldiers, and he told the entire army as follows. I'm sorry, and when the entire nation it was told, Hinei hamelech yoshev bashar, that the king is now sitting in the gate. Vayavo chol ha'am lifnei hamelech. So then the army came before the king. V'Yisrael, and here Yisrael is referring to the attacking Israelite armies, the ones that attacked them. Nas ish lo halav. Then they all ran away and retreated into their tents. They all went back home. So and which indicates clearly that the armies of Israel, the armies of Avshalom, were still poised to attack. And Yoav was obviously very right in what he had said, that had the king continued his behavior, his own supporters would have stopped supporting him, and the enemy would have ended up attacking David, and the whole monarchy would have been completely lost. So now, and now all of the people, the tribes of Israel. Now we start to see a even more of a fracturing between the northern tribes of Israel and the tribe of Judah, which eventually, as we know in hindsight, several generations later, will result in complete a split of the kingdom. At this point, we start to see the seeds of that split. We've been seeing on and off throughout the book of Shmuel, but it gets even more and more blatant, more and more clear. So among the tribes of Israel, they were saying, "Hamelach hitzilanu mikaf kol oivenu." They started looking at themselves honestly and thinking, "Wait a minute, David, this king, the king, he did a lot of great things for us. He saved us from all of our enemies. He saved us from the Philistines, who had been a thorn in the side of the people of Israel for hundreds of years now. But now David has finally conquered them and even made the remnant of them into allies. And now he's been chased out of the land because of Avshalom. So let's bring him back. V'Avshalom Omar Mishach. I'm sorry. V'Avshalom Omar, and Avshalom Asher Mashachnu Aleinu, the one who we decided to make king instead of David, Meis b'milchama, he's dead. He died in war. Why are you guys not bringing the king back? So the people of Israel started to realize it's time for us to recognize David, bring him back. Let's go bring him back and make him our king again and reestablish the monarchy. We see what kind of success he had. So here David now is in a position where his former enemies are starting to recognize that they should have stayed with David all along. David had accomplishments, real achievements. Avshalom did nothing except make a massive battle, which resulted in lots of death, including the death of Avshalom himself. So this is nice. This is good. This is an opportunity. So let's see, verse 12. V'Hamelech David sholach et Tzadok v'Elav Yasar el Tzadok v'Elav Yasar kohanim leimar. And David sent a message to Tzadok and Aviatar. Remember, they were still back in Jerusalem. And the message was as follows: Dabru el ziknei Yehuda leimar. I want you to speak to the elders of Judah, saying as follows: Lama tiyu achronim. Why should you guys be the latecomers to the party? If the northern tribes of Israel are now sending delegations to bring me back to Jerusalem and reestablish the kingdom, why are you guys playing second fiddle? To bring the king back to his house. U'devar kol Yisrael ba'al hamelech al beiso. Right? And because the words of the entire Israel is that the king should return to his house. So why should you guys be left behind? So ideally what should have happened here was Judah and Israel should have sent messengers to each other and decided together to bring David back. But that's not what the leaders of each tribal group did. What happened? Let's see. Achayatem. Before we get there, this is still part of the message. David is telling the people of Judah, you guys are my brothers. You guys are my family. Atzmiu b'sariatem. Right? I'm one of you. Why should you be the latter ones? Why should you be late to the party and bringing the king back? And to Amasa, remember Amasa was David's cousin, and he was established as the chief of staff of Absalom's army, of the enemy army. So Amasa was one of the leaders of the rebellion, but David, and as we've seen his behavior before, is trying to find an opportunity to reunite the people. He doesn't want to come back in vengeance and kill everyone who rebelled against him. He wants to bring them back in. He wants to bring about a united kingdom. So he says, tell Amasa as follows. Hello, Atzmi V'Sariyata, you're also my family. Remember, Amasa was David's cousin. Ko Yaseli Elohim V'Cho Yosef. So such should happen to me by God, and so should, and even worse. In other words, if I don't appoint you as the head of my army in the place of Yoav. So here he's taking the enemy commander. So now David is expressing the anger that he has against Yoav for what Yoav did. Yoav had disobeyed David's command and killed Absalom. So Yoav is pushing towards dividing the people, pushing towards getting rid of those who rebelled. David wants to bring them in, so he tells Amasa, who was the enemy commander, to take over his own troops. Whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, it depends on your perspective. The impression one starts to get from the verses as we read through them is that the prophet himself, or the writer, the narrator of Shmuel, is kind of wants to give us the impression that it's ambivalent. That, in other words, it might be this, you can see David's perspective, but you can also see Yoav's perspective. Which one is right, which one is wrong? That's very difficult to really know at this point. Was Yoav justified in killing Absalom? I'm sure anyone of the listeners can make a good case in support of Yoav and what he did. Can we understand David's perspective? I'm sure we can make a good case to understand David's perspective as well. Not all decisions are simple. Not all decisions have simple answers, and that's the impression one wants to get. But now to take Amasa and make him the chief of staff, is that a wise move? Is that a very unwise move? Does that potentially put a potential challenger to the king in an extremely high position? Yes. Does it potentially bring the people back together? Maybe. Let's see. Let's see how this plays out. But this is what David does. He takes Yoav out of his position because of what he had done, and places Amasa in that position. Vayet et levav kol ish Yehuda ki ish echad. So now Amasa, who's a member of the tribe of Judah, then, because remember, Judah was split now, because Judah itself, many of the Judeans supported Absalom, who was also obviously of David's family, right? And Absalom started his rebellion in Judah with Judeans. So it's kind of a mixed up bag of loyalties here. But Amasa did bring the heart of the people of Judah together. He raised the support of David among the tribe of Judah. So now the tribe of Judah is ready to, and then they sent delegations telling the king, come back to Jerusalem, you and your entourage. So while initially Judah was ambivalent because many of the Judeans supported Absalom, but the people of Israel felt that they should bring David back. Now the people of Judah, in part because of David's efforts at reuniting the people and taking Amasa, who was a supporter of the rebellion, and bringing him into his side, they also want to do it. But inadvertently, what this creates now is a fight between Judah and Israel over who should lead the procession in reestablishing David's monarchy. And that's what we're going to read soon. So the king began his journey back to Jerusalem, and he got to the point of the Jordan River, a key point which once he crosses the Jordan River, he'll be entering the territory of Judah. So Yehuda Baha Gilgal, the people of Judah then came to Gilgal. Remember, Gilgal is the area that was originally settled by Joshua when he first crossed the Jordan into the west part, the west bank of the Jordan River. And so Gilgal is near the crossing. So Yehuda is there, ready to greet the king. To come out and greet the king. To bring the king across the Jordan, which is a crucial point of this procession, of this triumphant procession of bringing the king back to Jerusalem. At this point, the king is about to cross. Shim'i ben Gera. Shim'i ben Gera is the guy who was making fun of the king, throwing stones at the king as they were refugees running from Jerusalem back a couple chapters ago when the situation for David looked extremely bleak. How things have changed since then for David and his supporters. So Shimei ben Gera realizes, of course, that he needs to do something, otherwise potentially this could be the end of his life. So he comes Ben Hayamini, and it reminds us that he was a Benjaminite. The Benjaminites would have much of their support still lied with the house of Saul. Remember, that's where Saul came from. So there's still some divided loyalties there. So Shimei ben Gera wants to establish to David that he's a strong Davidic supporter. Asher mi Bachurim, he was from the place of Bachurim, which is not far from Jerusalem. That place has come up several times in the last couple chapters. Vayeredem Ish Yehuda, and he came down with the people. Ish Yehuda would mean the leaders of Judah, right? He came down with them, Likrat HaMelech David, to greet the King David. What kind of reception is Shimei ben Gera going to have? The Elef Ish Imo mi Binyamin, and with him were 1,000 men from Benjamin, including some other important characters, including Vitziva Nar Beit Shaul, Tziva, who was the servant of Mephibosheth, right? So he was a young man who worked in the house of Shaul, the remaining house of Saul, Mephibosheth being Saul's son, his remaining heir, and the one who we're going to be reading about soon as well. And Tziva came with his entire entourage of 15 sons, and 20 servants. And they came down to the Jordan to appear before the king. So and when the passing, some kind of a ferry that was bringing the entire king's household across the Jordan, right? He wanted to be there when this passing was taking place. He wanted to treat the king well. V'shimi ben Gera, and at this point, so we're going to have all of the people that are worried, what's the king going to do, right? How is he going to treat us now, are now here, and each one wants to establish themselves before David comes back to Jerusalem to make sure they don't lose their lives, lose their fortunes, etc. They want to establish themselves in good graces with the king. So first, the verse is going to tell us about the how Shimei ben Gera tries to gain good graces with the king. So Nafalef Ne'amelech, he falls before the king Biavro by Ardain when he is crossing the Jordan. Vayomer el Hamelech, and he says to the king, Al yachshav li adoni avon, please, my master, do not remember my sin. Please forgive my sin. V'al tizkor, and please do not remember, and please do not hold against me Eit asher he'eva avdecha, that terrible thing which your servant had done, that I had done. Bayom asher yatsa adoni hamelech miyerushalayim, that which I had done when you, my master, had left Jerusalem. Remember, he doesn't say the words when he was running from Jerusalem. That would have been humiliating. He says when he had left. Lasum hamelech elibo. Don't put it to your heart. Don't think about it. Please don't. Because I, your servant, I know that what I had done was terrible. What I had done was a terrible sin. I have come today, the first one from the house of Yosef, And it's interesting because he was a Benjaminite. He's from Benjamin, but he's calling himself from the house of Joseph, which is Ephraim and Manasseh. Benjamin is technically not Beit Yosef, but you see here that Binyamin, the tribe of Binyamin, is allying themselves with the northern kingdom, which is often called Beit Yosef, because the northern kingdom primary tribes were Ephraim and Manasseh, at least, and Binyamin is already ethnically aligned with the house of Joseph. So he's saying, I was the first of those tribes to come down here and greet you, Loredet, to come down, Likrat Adoni HaMelech, to greet the king. So this was Shimei ben Gera's plea to David to please forgive me, please forgive what I have done. I'm here, I'm loyal, I'm here to escort you, and I'm leading the delegation to escort you back triumphantly to Jerusalem. What David's answer is going to be, how he's going to handle this Shimi ben Gera, we will find out on the next podcast when we read verse 22 in the next half of chapter 19. Thank you so much for studying this together. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 19 and the rest of the book of Shmuel together.